1 Samuel 23. 1 Samuel 23, the title is David's Haunted Hideout. The word haunt, it's gotten to where now that word has changed its meaning. I'm going to give you the Bible usage of it here. The Bible usage of the word haunt and the Old English usage of it just means a place that someone would often frequent. That is, Five Guys is a good haunt for lunch. That's a place I'm going to be.
Amen.
Not anymore. They've gotten expensive. Used to be a good place. So we're going to find a haunt in our passage here. This is David's haunt, a place that he liked to frequent. And we'll need to do the same as he does in our passage. So pay attention as we go through it. I'm not going to make a whole lot of application. I'm going to let you and God do that. 1 Samuel chapter 23. We'll begin in verse 14. We're breaking right into the middle of the story. I was telling Chris I threw out half of this message just to trim it down. I can't give you all the background information on what tragedies have befallen David, but it's a slew of them. We find him here at the point most people would have broken, and this is a bad spot. He no longer is able to communicate with his best friend Jonathan. That's been cut off. He's been cut off from his own family, his brothers and his father. He slowly starts getting some of them to come join his mighty men. But he's afraid if he associates with anybody, they'll end up dead, because the big cheese, Saul, is after him. And if Saul doesn't like you, he'll get to you one way or the other. Like the mafia. You know, if they can't get you, they'll go after your family. That type of thing. That's the way he feels. David here, spiritually, is running through the valley of the shadow of death. And I mean, death is on every corner. And he's going to have to learn, as a Christian, what God expects and how to have trust and faith that God's going to get him through and see him to the next step, even though it doesn't look like it. And I'm not going to be hard on him one bit. He did way better than I ever would have. That was some tough stuff he went through. Let's find it in our passage. 1 Samuel 23, verse 14. And David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hands. Good thing God's watching out for him. You think about it. Saul is powerful. He's running the country. And David's able to escape, but Saul's got spies everywhere. I mean, how long do you think you're going to last? I'm sure all those things must have gone through his mind at some point. Verse 19. Then came up the Ziphites to Saul to Gibeah, saying, Doth not David hide himself with us in strongholds in the wood, in the hill of Hakeilah, which is on the south of Jeshiman? I should have let David read all these names. Here's a turncoat. They're tattling on him. Say, oh, David's been hanging out down here with us. Let's see what kind of brownie points they're after. Verse 20. Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. And Saul said, Blessed be ye of the Lord. Doesn't he sound spiritual? For ye have compassion on me. Go, I pray you, prepare yet, and know and see his place where his haunt, there it is. That is, he's saying, I want to know exactly where he is. I want to know what time he wakes up in the morning, you know, what kind of coffee he's drinking. Sure he didn't drink coffee, but I don't know, they may have. I don't know where that came from. He says, and who hath seen him there? For it is told me that he dealeth very subtly. Yeah, don't you know it? That's the pot calling the kettle black. Saul's the subtle one. He's right here trying to trick David He says, get some men out there who are close enough to know for sure and certify it to me. Bring it back to me. And we'll all go together down there and we'll take care of business. Well, God's got other plans than Saul. Nowhere in here do we have Saul crying out to God, I've got a troublemaker in the nation that's, Now, there was something personal going on. Got to be careful. He says in verse 23, see therefore and take knowledge of all the lurking places. He's really trying to paint him as a corrupt character here. Where he hideth himself, and come ye again to me with the certainty. That is, give me a certified letter, prove it. And I will go with you, and it shall come to pass, if he be in the land, that I will search him out through all the thousands of Judah. And they arose and went to Ziph before Saul. But David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the plain in the south of Jeshimon. Saul also and his men went to seek him, and they told David. Wherefore he came down into, where? Does that look odd to anybody? Have you ever gotten into a rock? The Bible's got some unique wording, because it's intended to make you think about more than one thing. Now, I only know of one rock worth getting into that a person can get into. And the world's got some rock. It's rock and roll. It's going to roll right down the hill. Now, this one, our rock, is not like their rock. You covered that verse today. He says, into a rock, and abode in the wilderness of Man. And when Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Man. And Saul went on this side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David made haste to get away for fear of Saul. And Saul and his men encompassed David and his men round about to take them. He's not missing David on purpose. He's after David. Now, this is a scary time. We can read through this thing. I know we read through much of the Bible this way. It's either entertainment or it's almost a chore. I've read that one before. Let me see if there's anything new here I hadn't seen before. Okay, yep. No. If we relive it, we'd be scared to death. We'd say, if I write this story down, everybody is just going to be scared to death as I am. But no, not necessarily. Many people read this passage. Many people don't even know this passage is in there. This is one of those minor stories, but it ain't minor. He says in verse 27, but there came a messenger unto Saul, saying, haste thee, and come, for the Philistines have invaded the land. He sure changed his tune real quick. Look at this. He was all hot and heavy after David. They're going to play Ring Around the Mountain. Verse 28, wherefore Saul returned from pursuing after David and went against the Philistines. David, get ready to read. Therefore, they call that place, what's that name? Selah Hama Malakoth. Yeah, it means a rock of division. Okay, so there's the end of that story. We would all have different ideas of what we should be doing or what we could lay blame for this whole event on if we were going through it. We go through similar things, I'm sure. There's no temptation taking you but such as is common to man. If this one happened to David, you've had one just like it. Maybe not the same event, but the same setup, the same emotions, the same temptations. God's already promised you're going to do that. Oh, well, thank you. But we're all going to go through the same things. And so here's something unique about this one. I don't have to guess at what David was thinking. You know, a lot can be said from silence. Sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. I could say, the famous line is this: I could say that Peter shot his mother-in-law with a .45. Well, you don't know if he did or didn't, because it doesn't say. But just because it does not say that something doesn't mean that I can force it to say what I want it to. Okay, so in the story we've just read, we've not gotten a whole lot of David's brainwave going on in here. It's just been facts. This is what happened, this is what didn't happen. They came after me, God delivered me, the end of the story. We'll call this town something nobody can pronounce. There's the bare facts of the story. But for us, this is a great story because David told us exactly what he was thinking in 2 separate psalms. There's 2 separate psalms that deal with this very event. Look at it in Psalms. It'll be Psalms chapter 54 and Psalm 63. Psalm 54 and Psalm 63. And you'll want to mark those 2. We'll flip back and forth for the rest of the 6 hours we'll be here this morning. Okay, notice the most of your Bibles, I think, here today have a little intro. In Psalms, you'll get some intros. What those chapter intros are, is it tells you who's writing, the purpose of the writing, the chapter, and a lot of times it'll tell you why it was written. And that's what we find here. In chapter 54, the intro says this: to the chief musician on Neginoth, Mishkel, a psalm of David, when the Zephims came and said to Saul, doth not David hide himself with us? Remember that? We just read it. Yep. So that's what this psalm is going to be about. It's going to be about the events that happened during the story we just read. Now look at chapter 63. 63. Same thing. We'll look at the intro. A psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. Same event. That's Mayan and the other name I couldn't pronounce. That's the wilderness. That's down there on the that'd be the west side of the Dead Sea. That's considered the wilderness of Judah. Okay, so we're going to find out what he was thinking, what was going on in his mind. For me, I'd be out of my mind. That's what I'd be. I mean, you think, hey, look, maybe I'll just give myself up, die, get it over with, be done. But he doesn't. Let's notice some things back in chapter 54. 54. And notice has a focus here. And if you're going to go through a mess like that, you're going to have to stay focused, or the mess is going to control everything. Because that's what the devil wants. The devil wants control. Circumstance wants control of our life. Well, it ain't ours to give them. You don't have a life. Your life is hid in Christ. So don't be giving away something that belongs to him. He says in verse 1, save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me by thy strength. Hear my prayer, O God, and give ear to the words of my mouth. Okay, he says, I'm going to be speaking right. You can listen up. Now, he does that over and over. You'll see David. I mean, that's pretty... you're serious if you're telling God, take notes on me. Watch what I say. I don't know, some of us would even dare say we would never do that. However, he's serious about it. That's how serious he is. Notice, he's running for his life. Nowhere in there does he say, hey, God, I'm running for my life. I think that'd be the first thing I informed him of. Nowhere in there does he mention it. It's like, that's really not that important. I got to get on to some important things. And to him, what's important is thy name, thy strength. And he says, that's going to be the words of my mouth. Not about his problems. Wow. He's a better man than Americans.
Amen.
Now, his focus is going to propel him into action. He's going to do the right things. When he's focused on God, his mouth's going to be talking about God. A lot of our problems intend to gain praise. That's what they're intended for. They want to exalt themselves above God. Well, what's God do? God's do praise. So if our problems can get us talking about them instead of God, they've won. They've won his position. Ooh. We got to cast those thoughts down. Look at it in chapter 63. Psalm 63, verse 1. Psalm 63, verse 1. It says, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. We still wouldn't know he's running for his life. Verse 2. To see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. Okay, same thing we've seen before. He's doing this, he's focusing on God, and because of that, he's going to force himself to do some things. I will seek thee. Now, look at that verse 2. To see thy power. Now we're getting a little hint there's something he's after. He needs some help. But we wouldn't just know that unless you knew all the details of this. He says, I want to see your power like I've seen it before. He says, so as I have seen in the sanctuary. Now maybe he's talking about the cave of Adullam here. He's been in some tough spots before God's helped him out of. He's just come, this is his second or third hiding spot, running from Saul. It's probably his third or fourth. But anyway, here he is. He's saying, God, you've helped me in the past, and I want to see that again. That's imagination. You know, your imagination can be good or it can be wicked. It just depends on the focus of it. If you imagine God to be as great as God is, you'll never be able to do that, but you could try. He says to magnify him. That tells me you can't overdo it. You can't make anything bigger than God, as big as God, bigger than God. That's impossible. So go ahead, magnify him. Use your imagination correctly and it's a good thing. However, the way you use it incorrectly is to let anything else become bigger than God. And he's saying right here, I want to see that power. I've seen you do some powerful stuff before. And so now he's going to go through it. You know, I saw you in the sanctuary over there. I needed help down at the mulberry bush. You helped me out of that one. I needed help with, learning how to play like a crazy man before the king of Gath. All those things, God's come through for him. And now he's appropriating it, imagining. Now we got to do that too when you get into a situation. And many times we'll think we're running for our life. God knew he wasn't, but he sure failed to inform him. I mean, that's the way it is. That would have ruined the whole learning experience if God had said, hey, you're just going to run around out there and then I'm going to take care of the day and nobody's going to remember that, you were having this mental breakdown. Don't worry about it. That would have ruined it. So it puts him through this thing. Now, a great thing for us, we got a good example in David because he did it right. Here he did it right. Not always, but here he did it right. Let's notice back in chapter 54. Not only does he do all the things correctly as far as who he's going to exalt, God, and the actions he'll take because of it, and the imaginations that he'll allow himself to have, but now he gets down to the nasty now and now, the present tense. At some point you got to deal with reality. Isn't that so?
Amen.
At some point the problem says, tick-tock, it's me, I'm on time, where are you? Let's find it in the Bible. in chapter 54, verse 4. Behold, God is, that's right this minute, mine helper. The Lord is with them that uphold my soul. He says God is right now helping me. Not only that, he's also with a whole bunch of other people that are going to come help me. But he doesn't have any proof of it. Can he prove that? Not yet. But he's declaring it as though it were so, because he's been through enough times with God to know it is. Now let's find it in the next chapter, our other chapter, chapter 63. Chapter 63, verse 3. Chapter 63, verse 3. Because thy loving kindness, here it is again, present tense, is better than life. Huh? Those are some strong words. I'm about to die, but I got something way better than life. Wow. My lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. A Christian surrendering to Christ is not defeat. It's not like two opposing armies coming out and one of them says, we surrender, we give. No, that's not what a surrender is on the Christian life. In the Christian life, when we say we surrender to God, we're just joining the team we see as winning. God's always going to win. He's using this present tense. We're going to have to use that present tense too, because the devil's not going to give you the facts. He knows the present tense, and he ain't going to reveal them to you. He's going to lie about it. So you just open up the Bible and show him what the present tense really is. Now, there's thousands of verses I could give you. Well, maybe not thousands, but hundreds of verses I could give you on what God has promised he will do for a Christian. And those are going to be good for me, but not you. You got to find your own. Sorry. But find those. Those will get you through a David situation like this right here, because that present tense is one of those things you're going to have to deal with. Look at it back in chapter 54, verse 5. Now he projects out into the future. He says, I can tell you about the future because I've had a history with God. And the longer you're saved, the more you can do this yourself too. You know, he told the disciples he was mad at them because they were out there in a boat in the middle of a storm. And he says, well, didn't you know that I was going to calm the storm? Come on, that's a no-brainer. You saw me break some bread over there. They were supposed to connect those two dots. Okay, so every encounter we have with God is intended to be applied to whatever the next situation is. And that's what David's going to do here. Psalm 54, verse 5. He shall reward evil unto mine enemies. Cut them off in thy truth. I will freely sacrifice unto thee. I will praise thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he hath delivered me out of all troubles, and mine eye hath seen his desire upon mine enemies. Now he's saying all this prior to it being complete. He's just saying, I know God, and this is what's going to happen. Before it's all said and done, he'll have done this. I know I don't have any concrete verse on it that says I'm going to smack down all your enemies that come after you, but I know God. Every time an enemy's come up and got after me, it wasn't long before he took them out. So that's a safe bet to say that. And that's what he's doing here. Look at it in our other chapter, chapter 63. Chapter 63, verse 5. Focused on the future again. My soul shall be satisfied with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips. That's saying a lot when you're right here running for your life. He's saying, there's going to be a day I'm going to be sitting, fat and happy again. You know, we're going to have a buffet style feed, and I don't think that would be something I'd be thinking about. Out there running for my life. Saul's about to kill me. Got people turning on me. The story that was just previous to the one we read in chapter 23 of 1 Samuel is he goes up and he saves Keilah. Then Saul's going to come down, thinks David's in Keilah. And David asks God, should I go back to Keilah and save them from Saul coming in there and wreaking havoc again? God says, you can go back there, but those boys in Keilah are going to turn you over to Saul. Even though he just saved them. Everybody's turning against him. But that's not what he's talking about. He said, man, there's going to be a day I'm going to be eating good. Wow. That's okay. If you can give God credit for it, do it. It's a good use of imagination. But it's also good use of history. How's God done with you in the past? I don't think anybody in here has missed so many meals that it hurt us. Not in America. Now, maybe other countries they have, but not in America. God's been real good to Americans. Chapter 63, verse 6. He says, I'm going to be doing all that eating, and we're going to set the buffet up. Verse 6, when I remember thee upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches, because thou hast been my help, seen it in the past, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me. Always been doing it. No reason to think he would have stopped now. Wow, good stuff. Now this is all academic until life happens tomorrow. I mean, it's easy to read these things, and really it is. Until you force life to confront a story and you are the David in the story, it's not real yet. But it'll be real. Wait till tomorrow. Look at the next thing that happens in chapter 63, verse 9. He goes one step farther than just predicting some events and thanking God for the present tense. He does this, prophecy. Chapter 63, verse 9. But those that seek my soul to destroy it shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. But the king shall rejoice in God. Every one that sweareth by him shall glory. But the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. Amen. Now he knows enough about God to say those things. You don't just make up prophecy because you feel like it. It's got to be based on who God is. He knows enough about God to be able to say that, and it's a fact. It is. Now, he's not charismatic, stomping his feet and demanding he's the center of the universe and everybody's going to bow to him. That's not what he's doing here. You notice he says, the king. That king he's talking about in the passage there is obviously not Saul. Because Saul is the head liar. And he's one of them that's going to go down. But the king that he's talking about right there is probably himself. He's been anointed at this point. But he's not sitting on the throne. He's not ruling. Jonathan, his best friend, has just come in the previous chapter and said, I know you're going to be king. My dad knows you're going to be king. And I'll be second in command right next to you. Now, that didn't really happen, but David did become king. He got part of it right. He says right here, that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen before it's going to happen because I've seen God do it so many times before I can be confident in it. As Christians, we should be confident. Now, in conclusion, I'm going to give you a short little summary of what we just saw. I'm going to give it to you in the New Testament. Luke chapter 21. Luke 21, verse 19. I'm going to ask you to read something very simple to read, easy words. But then I'm going to ask you to do something that's very complicated, reading comprehension. What does it mean where it sits? Okay, let's read it. Luke 21, verse 19. In your patience possess ye your souls. Jesus speaking here. All right, let's get some context on it, see if we can figure out what he's talking about. Verse 16. And ye shall be betrayed, verse 17. And ye shall be hated of all men, verse 20. Know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Verse 23, there shall be great distress in the land. Verse 26, men's heart failing them because of fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. And what was that verse we were going to remember? In your patience, possess your souls. Huh? How does that line up with everything that's going to fall apart? That's where David was. Everything was falling apart. He possessed his soul correctly, according to the New Testament principle that's given to us here. Well, let's find out how we can do that. Verse 27. Phrase right there at the end. The Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now, there's where the patience is. Patience is not we're enduring and just hoping we get through and it hurries up. No, the patience he's talking about is something great on a scale this world has never seen before. That patience is anticipation. He says, we patiently wait. Okay, well, a lot of times we wait, but we're not having very much patience about it. Because sometimes when you got to wait, you don't have a choice. You've got to wait. It's not like you had a choice in that matter. The choice becomes whether or not you're going to be patient about the waiting. He says right here, in your patience, possess your souls. Your soul should be consumed with the thing you're being patient for. The thing we're being patient for is not putting up with problems. The thing we're being patient for is the King coming back and fixing everything the way he intends it. Heaven on earth. If you're a Christian, that's going to happen. We're going to see it. Matter of fact, we're going to be part of it. I know a lot of Christians don't, they believe that, but they don't act like it. Right. You don't ever hear them talk about it. They don't think about it. It's the farthest thing from their mind when he's coming back. I want it to be before I finish this thing. Let's get out of here. That's going to fix everything.
Amen.
I mean, everything. And he says right there, that should consume your soul. And you're patiently waiting on it. So let that possess you instead of 7 more wicked demons than you've ever seen want to come back and possess you. He says if you're not careful, that'll happen. In Isaiah 25, verse 4. Isaiah 25, 4, the Bible says this. For thou hast been a strength to the poor. Okay, let's just take the word poor out. John, that'll work. For thou hast been a strength to poor John. No. Probably, if you've lived very much of life at all, you could put your name in right there. And it fits. He's been a strength to you. It's a fact. But notice what tense is being used here. For thou hast been. That's past tense. Okay, when you get into trouble, problem strikes, the devil throws some illusions at you, start there. Go backwards. I know some great times where God pulled me out of some jams I didn't think there was any hope for. He says, a strength to the needy in his distresses, a refuge from the storm, a shadow from the heat. When the blast of the terrible ones, what's that word? Is as a storm against the wall. Now he just switched tenses on you. He went from past tense to present tense. From has been to is. And that's the way it'll be. The farther back and more credit you start giving God for the things he's already done for you in the past, it won't be long before you'll be saying that about something that hadn't even happened yet. That's what David did all through the Psalms. Look at it in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 33, verse 27, and we'll be done. Deuteronomy 33, verse 27. Deuteronomy 33, 27. It says, the eternal God is thy refuge. Now he is for a Christian. I know doctrinally this is speaking to a nation of Israel, but it sure applies to a Christian as well. He is your refuge. If he's not your refuge, there ain't no refuge.
Amen.
Because you ain't a good enough refuge for yourself.
Amen.
But God is. He said right here, the eternal God is thy refuge. Nothing's bigger or lasts longer than God. He's eternal. He says, and underneath what? You. Thy is the subject matter. So underneath you is what? The everlasting arms. Your support is from God. He's holding you up right now. Always has been. Been doing it when you didn't even give him credit for it. Now he goes on, he says, and he shall thrust out the enemies from before thee, and shall say, destroy them. Now, our warfare that we fight as Christians is not a physical one. We know that. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. It's spiritual ones. And our spiritual warfare is fought in the cyber field. Your mind. Your mind's where the warfare goes. He says right here, that's where God will destroy them. He's there, and he's supporting you with his everlasting arms, eternal arms. How do you say that? Everlasting arms. He says, I'm going to help you with this. And we can use his arms. And he says, I'm going to throw these problems down in front of you and say, destroy them. How did David do it? We saw he reflected on the past. He made it the present. Pretty soon he was talking about how great it was going to be, imagining for the future. Then he was ready to prophesy about what God was going to do in the future.